Welcome to the technology panel here at the Asia Pacific Research Center. I'm glad to be here, and I'll admit this topic is very personal to me, and I'll get into that shortly. But with me today, real quick introductions. We have Jonathan, who runs Taiwan's Gold Card program. Dom. I need to thank you for that. Dom, a founder who's been building on Taiwanese silicon, who I met in Taiwan. I'm very glad that he was able to make it out here for this. And Tony, an investor who's been backing Taiwan long before it was kind of fashionable to be back in Taiwan. So, glad you can make it. I say this is the first time that it's not the first time I'm doing a panel, but the first time I'm hosting a panel. So I look forward to asking all these questions that I've had trouble answering as a panelist for the last 15 years. Like, Tony, how do I stop my kids from watching too many YouTube shorts? I don't know.
That's your fault.
Or fake news. But it's good. I think I should start with just a real quick bit of my own background and my story, because I think it's a good bridge between being from a combination of Asia, Midwest, and then Silicon Valley, and then now back to Asia. So I was originally born in Taiwan. I moved to Chicago when I was 8 years old. I grew up there, and then in 1999, I moved from Chicago on a one-way flight to SFO to join PayPal at the time. And that was my first job. And PayPal was just an extraordinary education. I think it's not all smooth working alongside Elon and Peter Thiel and David Sachs, but it was a great experience, I think, just dropping in completely into what Silicon Valley was like, seeing the first dot-com crash, going IPO, going through the acquisition with many people in this room, going through the acquisitions and what it was like through eBay. And then I think most importantly from that experience, meeting the two other co-founders of YouTube, which we started in 2005. And we built that in 18 months to be the world's largest video platform and sold it to Google in 2006. I stayed on at Google for 3-4 years. Then I moved over to Google Ventures to get a glimpse of what it was like to be more on the investment side rather than on the entrepreneurial side of things. And all throughout that process, it was spending 20 years in Silicon Valley from 1999 to 2019 before making the move back to Taiwan. And that's the interesting part. I think it's with the Gold Card that was launched in
2018.
2018. With that, it was supposed to be a short trip, again, back to Taiwan. It was originally supposed to be just a 6 months, 12 months to go back to Taiwan while we were remodeling our house here in the Valley. And look, I just flew in from Taiwan 2 days ago. Well, we're still there 7 years later. And it's a little bit reminds me of the Silicon Valley experience in that a lot of it's unknown. It was, of course, like a few months in after you get there, COVID started. And then, like, surprisingly, so many people from Silicon Valley ended up going to Taiwan. Schools never stopped there, so I don't think the kids had to really learn how to use Zoom. They were able to still go into classes every day. And just about every place that you went to in Taipei, you were meeting with other people that you knew there. So, I think I think that's been a great experience, and I think I sort of represent both sides of that bridge, and that's what kind of we're going to talk about today. So, for today's conversation, I think it's really about the investors, the policymakers, and the founders who are working between this Taiwan and Silicon Valley corridor, and not just observing it, but proactively working on it. So with each of the people here with me, I want to introduce them a little bit more in detail. So Tony, a managing partner at 500 Global, one of the most active early stage venture firms that emerged in tech and someone who's investing in Taiwan for a long time. We spend a lot of time there in Taiwan talking about how to create this form this bridge between Silicon Valley and Taiwan. And so, Tony, maybe you can introduce yourself, like what brought you to Taiwan, what you saw there, and maybe talk a little bit about the strengths that you saw in the Taiwan startup ecosystem.
Sure, thanks, Steve. I think just in terms of background, so prior to 500, I was working at Google. And when I was working at Google, we just had headquarters in Mountain View. And I remember I was one of the people on our, what we call the executive manager group that was deciding on where to put our Asia Pacific headquarters. And there was a lot of research that went into it, and it came down to 4 places, right? The 4 typical ones, because we already had our European headquarter in Dublin for tax purposes. And so we were gonna, okay, well, Asia Pacific. And then the 4 usual suspects, you probably guess, I don't know, like who?
Singapore.
No, not Seoul. Singapore was on the list. Hong Kong was on the list. 2 more.
Tokyo?
Tokyo was on the list.
Shanghai.
No, Sydney. Right, so that 4, I was like, okay, that's a good list. You can compete against that list. If Sydney made that list, Taiwan was nowhere on the list. So we went through the whole thing, and I remember, so it was like, well, I was born in Taiwan. I was like, oh, Taiwan didn't make the list, and Steve had mentioned investing in Taiwan before it became fashionable. I will say that there was a time when investing in Taiwan was very fashionable, way before, because back in the early days of venture, the number 1 market for venture capital was the US. It was obvious. The number 2 market, people don't know this, it was Taiwan. And once I mention why, it's obvious, because basically silicon, right? Like the transistors and entire supply chain, that was all venture capital fueled. And then software happened, and then it became there was much fewer investments. So I think there's a couple things that I'm very concerned about right now. Just looking at the ecosystem, Taiwan was on a tear for a period of about 10 years, and it reached its peak in terms of the numbers of startups that formed in 2014. It was about 550 startups in 2014. Since then, it's just come down by a lot. And when you talk to the policymakers there, some of it is COVID. Everyone experienced a drop in COVID. And then some of it was the fact that I think Taiwan was benchmarking itself against its bigger neighbor. And that's turned out to be a really bad artificial benchmark, because that neighbor had done a lot of things to actually just snuff out that ecosystem entirely in the last few years. But things have changed then. So that's something that I am concerned about. But the thing to answer your question, Steve, the thing that gives me a lot of excitement is the fact that what made Taiwan a really main player in the early venture capital ecosystem has returned, and for all the obvious reasons. So that's very, very exciting as well. And I can get into some specifics around that, but just want to throw that out there.
Thank you. Next, I want to introduce Dom. He's the founder of Zero Risk, and it's a hardware security company built on open source silicon. And maybe during your introduction, you should kind of explain what that is for the people in the room that's never heard that before.
It's not the only room that hasn't heard it before, so happy to do so, yeah.
But he splits his time a lot in Taiwan, Silicon Valley, Cambridge, amongst many other places. And I think he was great to have here. I'm very thankful that he accepted the invitation to be on this panel, because he's been taking fundraising from many of the sources from Silicon Valley, right, and combining and bridging it with a lot of the fabs and manufacturing that's there. That's the powerhouse of Taiwan. And he's doing that on a whatever, on a monthly basis, going back and forth between the two. So I'd love to, to hear a little bit more about what Zero Risk is doing and this verifiable trust problem that you're trying to solve with the company.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I guess it's worth. So I too was at Google for a period of time. I did my stint there, and while I was there, I started something called OpenTitan, which was turns out was like the first commercially relevant piece of open source silicon. And when we say open source silicon, we mean the chip design, the testing, the software that goes into it is all actually completely transparent. And then that started to actually get to a point where it was being manufactured, which means spending some time going to Taiwan, where the manufacturing is, and starting to interface with that very geographically localized but very important ecosystem of chip makers, fabs, packaging houses, all the things that actually make the supply chain flow. So sometime in that period, I left Google and started Zero Risk, and so what Zero Risk has really been focused on, and it sort of has extended my engagement with Taiwan, because if you care about supply chain integrity, you care about knowing where things are, you care about being able to have the security of a device kind of start when it's fabricated, when the chip is fabricated, and then be able to control it from that point on, regardless of the journey it takes through the supply chain, you kind of have to go to where the chips are actually being made, which is, at least from a revenue perspective, Taiwan. So, we've recently opened an office there. We are starting to pretty actively hire there. And so, one of the interesting things about taking something that Taiwan understands very, very deeply, which is silicon, and explaining it to them in a well, no, but we kind of give all of that design, we give all of that away, is one of the, it's an educational lift, I would say. It is very, very, this is a region that clearly understands ecosystems, but not like SaaS. Like there's not really an equivalent, like this is how you make money off of open source. And so it just kind of looks like free stuff in a way. So I think that's one of the more interesting sort of engagements I've had, is explaining to these very, very large, very successful high volume chip companies that no, you really can generate a lot of value even if you give away a portion of what you're doing, right? And so I guess that's to say, like, what we do is we sort of give away this like secure silicon design to encourage adoption, to build this large ecosystem, and then we sell all the ancillary services that allow you to trace its journey through the supply chain, and even if you don't have complete visibility, to regain control of the silicon when it lands at your site or your manufacturing facility or what have you. So that's pretty much what we do.
And sitting next to me is Jonathan Liao, who runs the Taiwan Gold Card program, without which I wouldn't be able to be in Taiwan for 7 years. It's the government high-skilled talent visa program. I was the first holder of the Gold Card, but I think now dozens of countries have started copying this program. And
110. Well, we have 110 nationalities, but many countries have a Gold Card program.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, but Taiwan was one of the first. It took I don't know when the idea, I mean, you obviously know the history a lot more, but I think I was just curious also about just revealing to this group here a bit about kind of the scorecard of now 6 years in. How has it been doing? And has it been kind of meeting the ambitious goals of what the program was supposed to do from the onset?
Yeah, so early on, I think many Asian countries have a population issue with low birth rates and aging societies. So the idea of the Gold Card program and other talent programs, it's been around for a while, but Taiwan eventually started its Gold Card program under the National Development Council. It was the end of 2018. At the time, they were looking for somebody to represent the program, so they sent an invitation to Steve. I wasn't actually involved in the program at the time. I was actually working with a startup incubator called Taiwan Tech Arena, which is another government program that housed many accelerators, eventually housing Tony as well. And then, so after Steve came on, COVID hit, which was very interesting in a very coincidental time where Taiwan was safe. It had a lot of resources, and all of a sudden it had a visa program that was available for foreign talent to come to Taiwan. So it was during those years in 2020 onwards that it really skyrocketed. So, prior to 2020, from that short period, it was maybe a couple hundred gold card holders. Since 2020, every year since, we've been there's been over 2,000, 3,000 people that have applied. So we're now at 16,000 gold card holders from 110 different countries. And that kind of shows in some ways that the interest in Taiwan, I think, has been continuing, which has been amazing. What those people have been doing, so the gold card, just a quick introduction, it's a qualification-based resident and work visa. So people of different backgrounds, could be in tech, could be in academics, in cultural and arts, finance, even in sports, are able to apply, and then they receive a gold card, which is a 3-year resident and work visa that allows them to stay in Taiwan, start a business, work for themselves, work remote. And I think it's actually been one of the more successful programs that has, both attracted and retained a lot of the people that have been in Taiwan. I hope. Thank you. No, I think it does show something though. Many countries do have a gold card program. Portugal, the United States has one as well. Taiwan has been very open and flexible on how it attracts foreigners. It's an open letter. There's no obligation. There's no investment required. There's no stay required. You don't even have to come if you don't want to. But I think most people do, and most people end up falling in love with the country in some shape or form, which has been the greatest part. So there's a few other gold card holders in here. I'm not going to call you out, but it's.
I see a lot, yeah.
It's a great way for everybody to get connected, and I've been very fortunate to be at that nexus point, I think. That's my quick background, I guess.
Great. Well, I thought we could just dive right in with the kind of the first discussion about kind of Taiwan's current position in the technology and semiconductor sector, right? So I put up some of these numbers, and it was interesting because they changed from when I started doing the research to when I was just looking it up to review some of the material. So as of mid-April 2026, Taiwan stock market surpassed the UK to become the 7th largest equity market. And then just yesterday, I checked again, and it became number 6. It just surpassed Canada as well. That happened all in 2 weeks. I don't know who number 5 is, but I don't know, maybe if we have this conference next week. But the part of it is that nearly 60% of that is in semiconductors and electronics, right? And TSMC alone is $1.5 trillion out of that $4.4 trillion market cap. So over 40% of the entire stock market is in just one company. And it's a very laser-focused economy. It's not very diversified. And I think that focus makes it indispensable to everybody inside Taiwan and out. So I do think that it's important to consider all that TSMC has enabled. I was looking at just even the Fab 7 companies, the top magnificent 7 companies with Apple's silicon chips. It's TSMC's largest customer. All the iPhones, all the MacBooks, on the MacBook Pros, they're all made by TSMC. You have NVIDIA with H100, H200, the Blackwell chips. All of those are made at TSMC. Google's TPUs chips, they're made at TSMC. Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, all their AI training chips, they're all at TSMC. And even Tesla, I guess, their self-driving chip is based in fab and built at TSMC. So 7 of the most valuable companies in the world, and every one of them, they have a critical dependency on the single island of 23 million people and one single company on that island. And so without TSMC, we wouldn't have the AI storm that we're seeing. Without TSMC, we wouldn't have the iPhone. And so I think that dependency is very direct. So I wanted to kind of ask the panel here about that correlation between Taiwan and TSMC, or maybe more broadly, just Taiwan and semiconductors. Is that the whole story, or how accurate is that framing of Taiwan is just the semiconductor factory for the rest of the world. And does it matter that so much of Taiwan's economy is identified and concentrated in just one sector, or perhaps just one company? More so than you can't see that in any other country other than Taiwan. I don't know.
Oh, I'm happy to. So we are invested in software, and more and more, you just can't get away from the AI ecosystem. I will say that in this AI age, I do see some differences in how the entire ecosystem has come and evolved to support that development. And I think that it could do more. Maybe just come back to that. But I'll give you an example. During I think there was a period right after the mid-2000s when it could have been anyone's game on the smartphone side. And in fact, Taiwan was in the lead with the HTC. And that was an incredible opportunity for Taiwan. It made the first Android phone, Nexus 1, and a number of things that happened after that. I feel like what Taiwan didn't do as well during that period was to rally the entire ecosystem, including corporate partnerships and government partnerships around a national champion. We saw that really well with the US, with iOS, and really well with Korea, with Samsung. But Taiwan didn't sort of develop those ties in that sort of way of trying to win that industry. So it was, you could say like, okay, well, it was a little bit slow. It was a little bit early in terms of its understanding of some of these technology gains. I almost feel like despite how big of a lead TSMC is in now, I almost feel like Taiwan is in a position to lose it again. And the reason I say that is that there's only one threat to TSMC, which is the threat to TSMC is less TSMC. That is the only thing. If you talk to anybody, they would say, look, there's no need for me to build my own fab capacity or go to this company or that fab if TSMC would just take my orders. So and if you ask TSMC, like, we're building as fast as we can, we're energy bottlenecked, we're environmentally bottlenecked because there's environmental reviews down in Tainan and Kaohsiung. So I think that is something like, okay, well, I'm not saying to eliminate all the native birds. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But think about this as a way to make sure that TSMC and the surrounding ecosystem is in a position to win with the backing of both private and public partnerships. So that's on the AI side. So on the non-AI, non-semiconductor side, as software investors, there is still a lot of opportunities that we're seeing and talent that's specific to Taiwan. And a couple areas I'll call out. I think people have largely recognized the talent in cybersecurity coming out of both two places, US and Israel. And for obvious reasons, Israel has some of the best security talent. But also under-recognized is the security talent that's coming out of Taiwan. Just because of both the defensive threats that they have to manage. They see threat actors before anybody else does. So that's actually quite a big advantage from a talent point of view. And then the second is around healthcare. And in fact, if we look at the way one of the fastest returners that we had, it was the biggest software exit in Taiwan's history, which was a security company that we had done the seed round, brought them to the US, introduced them to a bunch of customers and partners, and they got acquired by a large public company in the US. And so that was a great example of like that thesis playing out. We had the hypothesis that these talented founders really could play on the global stage and needed that capital and needed those introductions. So absolutely, and they had nothing to do with semiconductors, right? So we're in the process of doing that sort of on the healthcare side as well. But it just takes. I think the problem with healthcare is more it's our problem, the U.S. problem, and it's not you, it's us. So I think hopefully we can solve the healthcare some of the barriers on the U.S. side, and then bring more of the founders from Taiwan over.
We should talk about the IT security of the Taiwanese semiconductor and electronics manufacturing industry, because maybe they should keep some of that talent there. I've had to deal with some things there that are frightening. So yes, I think it is very concentrated. Yes, it is very important. I will say more and more when I go there and I talk to folks, I keep hearing about a Taiwan plus one strategy. Yeah. So there is an effort to sort of distribute some capacity a bit. I mean, those things don't exactly take no land and have no power and no water requirements. 3 things that are relative challenges for Taiwan. But there's a big advantage in Taiwan, which is that ecosystem is, you go down to like Hsinchu Science Park, and in a 5-mile radius, there's 20% of the world's capacity or something like that. That's insane. You walk through the TSMC office, and the GUC office is right across the street, and the test guy is down the street, and the PCB guy, and you go to Arizona, and it's oh, that's 5 miles away in 110-degree heat. You're like, I don't enjoy that. Oh, it's not like Taiwanese climate is that much better. But, but I think it's a real strength too.
I was going to say, because, it's interesting for you that you kind of know TSMC both from just working with them operationally from within Taiwan, and as a kind of a global company from the outside looking at it from the perspective and lenses from a U.S. company, right? I'm just, this is a question that I often get, but I don't have an answer to, which is why are the Samsung foundries always still 2-3 years behind? The Intel foundries, the China's SMIC, it's always 3 years or growing. For the last 20 years, it's been that way. And I've been curious what makes TSMC always able to, if not extend that curve.
Oh, I think there's a misperception that TSMC runs on silicon and fancy sand. It runs on people with masters and PhDs and material scientists that are produced by the thousands every year who are willing to work double and triple shift. This is a very human capital intensive industry, and folks who, when an alarm goes off and the line doesn't stop but just slows down a little bit at 3 a.m., no one waits for their boss to call them. They get on their scooter and shoot down there as fast as they can to fix the problem. This is a very, very person intensive, knowledge intensive, and the willingness to literally sit there with the machine and tweak the parameters until the yield curve goes up and up and up and up and up, right? When they started building the TSMC plant in Arizona, I was like, oh man, I wonder when the lawsuits are going to start. And I think it was a year later, the New York Times was like, yeah, there's a lot of lawsuits. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That was pretty much predictable. So I really genuinely think it's that level of commitment and dedication. And also there are a lot of material scientists. I have some very, very close friends who now live near me in Boston, who got degrees in media and arts, and then they're like, no, we're all material scientists. All of our undergraduate degrees are material science. We did other stuff here, but trust me, we all understand material science. So that's really, I think, all there is to it.
I'm going to tack on to that a little. One of the observations I've had earlier this year, I was able to travel with 12 of the Taiwanese public universities on different trips. And there is a parallel with Silicon Valley and Stanford being so close to Sand Hill Road and all the startup ecosystem, and the parallel of Yangming Jiao Tong University and Hsinchu and its surrounding universities, that exactly all the students, the engineers, the professors, and the alumni are all in that ecosystem and so very close and are able to contribute to that. And that's in some ways, for me, Taiwan has an Asia Silicon Valley development program. A lot of countries have been trying to copy Silicon Valley, and that's one parallel that I've noticed, where in Taiwan the semiconductor ecosystem, with the schools, with all the fabs, the supply chain, all within that 5 mile radius, that's pretty hard to beat, I think. Where it goes from there, especially with the population, decline and everything. But there is one interesting note. TSMC is what it is. It's Taiwan's big brother. There's no getting away from that. Hsinchu is one of the only cities that has positive birth rate growth, because there's money there. The engineers there they have a stable life, perhaps overworked, but at least the families are happy to be there. So there's some positives that come from all of this.
I guess the one thing I would also encourage people to think beyond TSMC. I know like that's the fancy high margin stuff, but there is power chip and UMC and all the other, like there's so much important stuff that is running through there, right? It's really, I know there's the fancy like big stuff that costs all the money, but there's just huge amounts, right? There's also like flash fabs, like Winbond and all these other players. Like it's really, really hard to buy something that is not at least partially made in Taiwan these days.
It's crazy to know that we're going into a different universe when a fab is called the fancy high margin stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because I think from my own experiences, having moved to Taiwan in the last few years, you have these beasts in the technology sector, but it's very different. I think in Taiwan, OEM, original equipment manufacturer, it's a company that builds products, but it's designed by someone else. It's based on someone else's logic, and it's under someone else's brand, right? And in Taiwan, it excels in that category where success is measured in like yield rates, defect rates, the on-time delivery. And it's very different from that of Silicon Valley, right? I think Taiwan perfects known problems where Silicon Valley is always trying to find new ones. And I don't know if you've seen that a little bit. And I don't know if that plays a factor also when it comes to sort of innovation versus are you disciplined to think outside the box when you're working at TSMC? Or it's just the same. Is it possible to recreate TSMC in Silicon Valley or in Arizona?
With a lot of automation. I remember I was visiting your shared workspace at one point. I was like, oh, where's your makerspace? And it was like, Dom, come on. This is like child's play here. It's like, oh, you're gonna make one of something and it's gonna take you a day and it's gonna cost that's just not what we do, right? It's like, I'll talk to my cousin, we'll get the fabs done next week, and then we'll scale it up and it'll be great, right? But I think there is something to that, if it's measurable, if you can hold it, if it's physical, Taiwan is just extraordinary at that, right? You can bring them something and say well, I need this kind of optics or this kind of thing or this kind of thing. And I don't think it's new with silicon, giant bicycles was from there. High precision manufacturing is kind of the thing they do, which makes a lot of sense when you're area constrained. You've got a solid, really solid educational system. You add value, right? So. Yeah, could you do TSMC in Arizona? It's going to be a very, very heavily automated plant, right? It's going to have to be. So.
Anything else? Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I think one interesting part that the focus of the panel is about the trade policies. Especially the tariff policies that have been changed a few times between Taiwan and the U.S. And I think it started off as originally 32%, and then I think it's down to 15%. But then there's also, depending on again how much that you can manufacture and make here in the U.S., that's going to impact what those overall tariffs are. So. Again, I think from the zero risk standpoint, I was curious how you felt when those tariff announcements were first announced and continue to change. But how does that impact someone that has such a tight dependency on the prices?
So I have to be careful. I think I know some of the people who are responsible for that. Because we don't we don't actually make silicon. We enable people to make silicon, right? We sell trust and transparency and data and like an understanding we basically guarantee control of devices, right? So we don't tend to get impacted by this, right? I think when those hit, I was like, well, this is not the right way to incentivize growth of an industry in the US. Might get you like a little bit of a sugar rush, get some initial like investment motivated or something, but it seems kind of, I hate to say it, but potentially self-defeating long term. Because you know, even if you do something where you make a trade and you say, well, you know, you can get your tariff rate down if you do a bunch of investment in the US. Well, the kind of investment that a country like Taiwan is going to do in the US is not exactly going to happen overnight. And it requires a real long-term commitment. And you know, I would hope that everyone has thought through the long-term consequences of that sort of policy. But we'll find out. We're all living the experiment.
Jonathan, I was curious. I mean, it's kind of the reverse of the gold card. But so in February, the trade deal felt like a two-way street with the U.S. dropping tariffs down to 15%. But as a consequence of that, you have thousands of TSMC engineers moving out, the top engineers moving out of Taiwan, moving into Phoenix on like these expedited work visas. And it's kind of the opposite of the gold card. I was curious what your thoughts are on that. Is that a kind of a brain drain on some of this top semiconductor talent from Taiwan to the U.S.? And you know, is this 15% tariff essentially the U.S. paying Taiwan to export its expertise as quickly as possible to the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's a scary time, I guess, in some ways, in terms of talent, which is what I work on. You know, largely it's been focusing on talent inbound to Taiwan, trying to attract more people to Taiwan. But with the tariffs and the economic trade agreements, you know, there's a huge and support from the government, a huge investment on companies coming to the U.S. So later this year, and especially in the Texas area, there's 5 of the very largest advanced manufacturing. They're all setting up shop in Texas, in which they will need a lot of human capital and people. And so it's been interesting that, and I think talent is no longer a one-way street. It's not about a brain drain of people leaving one country for the next. It's kind of very much, when they leave and it's actually a good experience, they get the training and the experience that they can therefore then bring back or to share among their peers. So this year we had multiple trips to the US to attract talent, still back to Taiwan, but largely more into Taiwanese companies, either in Taiwan or in the US. So and there's a huge appetite for it. I've been trying to understand especially the job market here in Silicon Valley, but it seems like, especially in the young generation, they are looking for different jobs. The recognition of Taiwan and what it's doing is generating more interest. So we start to see not just the Taiwanese population in California, but there's a lot of Indians, people from Hong Kong, as well as Americans, all looking to understand what it's like working for a Taiwanese company. Perhaps maybe in the beginning to start with the U.S., but hopefully at some point they'd be interested to come to Taiwan as well. I guess one note on the brain drain issue. Previously in the past 2-3 decades, Taiwan has been very worried about all of its top university talent coming to the U.S., going to the U.K. But we've also started to see those are the people that have that 10-15 years of very strong experience that are now contributing back to the Taiwanese companies. So those actually are a lot of the focus of the Taiwanese companies that are in the U.S. that are now leading the teams and hopefully generating more value for everyone.
And I'm curious from your side, Tony, like from the VC side, we're seeing $165 billion going into the ground in Arizona. But the engineers, a lot of the chemicals, the secret sauces, the recipes, the formulas, they're still in Hsinchu in Taiwan, right? And from an investor's perspective, do you think this ecosystem that we're building in Arizona, in the U.S., is real? Is something that is going to start attracting the pool of capital from VCs in Silicon Valley and in the U.S.?
I do know of certain funds that have been raised specifically to focus on that ecosystem in Arizona, right? Because it's not just TSMC, they bring their whole supply chain, their ecosystem, and suppliers have to come along with them, including, by the way, at the very end, funding Boba shops, right? Because these are going to be families that go there and have to live there and school, and there's a number of private schools that are coming up. So I think absolutely it becomes an entire ecosystem that gets built there, and we know capital is being formed to support that. There was a report a little over a year ago that the first fab had yield rates that were a little bit higher than in Taiwan. And so that was something that was really interesting, as we don't invest in the fabs, but just as an industry watcher. So there could be signals or data, but I feel like it could be falsely interpreted because when you look at yield rates, if you can easily get better yield rates with mature processes, right? And so that to me felt like, oh, that's not like a better process, in Arizona. It's a more mature process in Arizona, and you're comparing that to the 2 nanometer process in Kaohsiung or Hsinchu, and that's just not a fair comparison. It could lead to just a loss of data or a false signal. But yeah, to answer your question, I do know personally of funds that are absolutely going after that, not in the traditional sense that we've seen in terms of funding IP or software, but it's an atoms world these days. So.
Yeah, I think the one area that I want to hit on next, and it's a little bit more personal to me because it's what I've been working on for the last few years while I've been in Taiwan, which is really to try to find a better way to be able to bridge together Taiwan and Silicon Valley to be able to find and mix and match the strengths and the weaknesses and try to find the best of both worlds, right? And I think many people on this stage have gone through that same experience. So I think I'm curious, Dom, like you founded Zero Risk in the US. You're building a lot of the efforts with an office there in Taiwan, with engineers in Taiwan, manufacturing there, and you're spending a lot of time traveling in between. I guess, it's, and I've been advising a few of these companies that are in similar kind of formulas where they're formed in the US, they're going after the global markets, fundraised in the US, but they realize that it really benefits them to be opening something in Taiwan. But it's not easy to do. And I'd love to just for you to share some of that experience of what it's like. I mean, how long did it take before going from thinking about opening an office in Taiwan to...
Like 2 years. And I was like, and the first guy we hired was German, gold card, specialist in like post-quantum cryptography, just because he started his postdoc there when the pandemic started, and he's been a year from moving away for 6 or 7 years now. It's super challenging. I mean, luckily, I've got enough connections in the industry, a lot with actually people who did like a stint over here and then went back to Taiwan, running, some chunk of GUC or ASC, whatever it is, right? Because if you don't get connected to that local ecosystem or the right parts of that local ecosystem, you're toast. There's not like, it's cute to talk about a front door. There is no front door. There's like, this guy's son or, this guy's like brother or cousin or something, right? And if you don't have the kind of understanding of that sort of soft network, like you're never gonna get anything done. Like it's just not gonna happen. And there's also a lot of there's some interesting hiring patterns. Like instead of hiring engineers, it makes a lot more sense to hire an engineering manager who will bring his entire team with him to the next company. And you're like, oh, I see. Okay, so there's a way to do this here that is a little quite different from the US. So I think figuring out some of those things has been part of what took a long time, but also I don't know how many people have tried to set up a office in another country, but getting a bank account set up or getting that critical tax number is like not fun. It's never fun, and there's like there's like 1,000 different wrong ways to do it, and there's like one right way, and you need to find the person who can tell you the one right way to do it, and it's not the same right way for every country. So yeah, it's like that kind of stuff has been really, really challenging. But
the biggest challenge, I've seen is trying to find that regional manager, the first hire in Taiwan that has both experience in the network in Taiwan, knows how the engineers work, but then also know how to report up into the corporate level here.
Yeah, it's a very different management culture. I'm sure everyone here has some notion of what that's like, and so you just got to kind of get used to it and realize like how it differs and how you kind of succeed in both environments. And it takes a while, and it takes quite a bit of travel and like time and getting to know people and getting to know people's friends and understand like when you're being introduced because we're going out drinking or when you're being introduced because we're going to do some business together, and like being able to partition that stuff, it can take a while to figure that out.
But I think it's interesting. It brings me to asking Jonathan about, again, building this corridor for talent between the U.S. or other parts of the world and Taiwan. I think that we went talking about how Gold Card was kind of a novelty, and then now it's mimicked in many other countries around the world. And I think we've total number, over 15,000 Gold Cards approved. But I don't know if you could, Peter, I think it's not just the engineers that we're bringing in as part of the Gold Card program, but it's also just all the other aspects that are needed to be able to bring talent into Taiwan. It's not just engineers, and I don't know if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the Gold Card is, it's not solely for engineers, but I think obviously a large contingent of it are work in tech, being Taiwan's strength. But Taiwan is after people from all different backgrounds. And earlier today, Taiwan is a very free and democratic society where different ideas, different thoughts, and different our ideas can also be viewed and discussed and portrayed. And that's actually one of its strengths, especially in Asia, where many Chinese-speaking countries or that certain topics are not allowed. And I think that open society, very much is relatable to the Western society. Mm-hmm. But all of these, the people in that entire ecosystem supporting could be tech companies, but not necessarily, are all welcome under the Gold Card program. That being said, I do think engineers is the hottest commodity right now, and it's something everyone's after. So that will continue to be a focus. But I personally, my background's not in tech. I'm the least startup qualified in this panel for sure. But it's been great to meet, sports figures and film people, people in education and academic, and they all contribute, I think, to what Taiwan is, and that also brings a more personable feel to what could be a very cold topic of just semiconductors.
And I think from Tony, it's interesting from your perspective, and coming from that VC background, right? I think, again, Taiwan's engineers are recognized world-class at executing known problems, whereas I think in Silicon Valley, so the strength is kind of exploring the unknown, and it's just, kind of finding out, experimenting around with solutions to problems. And you kind of operate in both sides of that. And so I guess it's just, for folks in this room that are interested in that, what is that pairing of, the ideas and the entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley with an engineering team that's based out in Taiwan? Are there kind of hurdles that many of these companies run into as they're getting off and started? And if you can share.
Yeah, there are. The assumption is that here I will be the design house, I will be and then I can use my engineers as sort of the fab, right? That doesn't really work. So I think, and I think it goes beyond just engineering, because if you look at some of the ecosystem in Taiwan, right, like so many advanced and lots of expertise, I would say that there's, in addition to the founder side, I think the investment community could use a lot of innovation just in terms of how to think about forming capital around these new entrepreneurs and these new founders. Because I would say, describe the investment community, despite the fact that they're now the 6th largest market in the world, right? The investment community is very mature, but not very advanced. So that sounds like a paradox, but I think the investment mentality has sort of been baked for a while. And there's a lot of innovation that they could go through. I'll give you 2 really good examples that they stick in my mind. One, when I first sort of got there, and one that's recent, which reminds me of, wow, there's still a lot of innovation that could occur within how capital is being deployed in Taiwan. So the first one, when I got out there, I met, just meeting founders, meeting businesses, and there was this company that was doing really, really well. It was doing, it was making point of sales systems, and I think they had over 15 million in ARR or annual recurring revenue, which means that they got product market fit, they're growing, something is really, really working. And in fact, if you've ever been there, if you get a receipt from anything you buy, you will know their name, right? So massive brand awareness. And I was like, okay, great, you guys are ready to do a growth round. And they're like, no, we're gonna go IPO. And I was like, you're gonna go IPO, like, what? And they're like, I was like, why would you IPO now? And they said, oh, our investor wants us to IPO. I was like, wow. And then I was talking to an investor one day, and I was telling him the story. I was like, how in the world did the investor want them to go IPO? And then I realized, it was that moment, there was this, I don't know if you saw this old movie called Silence of the Lambs, where the protagonist is in the very room where the murderer that she's investigating, she realizes this is the killer. And I was telling this investor the story. I was like, why would they want him to IPO? And then I was like, they're like, oh, we are their investor. And he explained to me, he's like, we got our 3x. And I almost fell out of my chair.
Yeah.
I was like, on the venture side, if you get a 3x, you may as well get a 0x. But I didn't say anything, right? Like I was like Jodie Foster. I backed out easily. So I was like floored by that. And the other more recent example is this company that's doing amazing. And we were actually a small investor. It didn't really do anything for us, but we think that they are. They could be like really big security play in the U.S. And so we did a bunch of work to get them in that position, which included diluting ourselves and diluting the other investors. Because they were going to go into another round and they were going to have way too little capital to keep going. But that plan, which hurt us, right, included, would overall just expand the pie for everyone. But it was blocked by some, it was blocked by their existing shareholders. So that's what I mean by like, oh wow, there's a lot of innovation that could happen on the capital formation side there.
Yeah.
To just try to keep up with how these companies are founded. And I'll give you one sort of bright side, which is, and I was thinking about why is this happening? So well, I can understand because a lot of the businesses that are billion-dollar businesses in Taiwan, they're like still family-owned, right?
Yeah.
They don't really think about dilution. They don't think about raising downstream capital. So and so I was like, oh wow. But there's the one bright side that I see is that it's like, if these investors really understood the power of being able to get a blockbuster investment to just be huge, like they would know, what Director Christensen was saying is like, the Jensen Huangs of the world, the Steve Chens of the world, you only need like a handful of one or two to create a whole new economy. I was thinking like, well, yeah, they have that. But I realized the investors in those cases was the government. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, private capital that understands how powerful that could be, and now they're actually experiencing it, and now they're actually living out that power law. It wasn't private capital, it was the government. And now the government is actually in that role because it understands the power of the power law. I think, hundreds of millions in paid in dividends every single quarter. And I see that as like, oh, well, that's actually, now they're actually doing what they need to do to just but unfortunately, private capital didn't experience that.
Can I ask just a quick follow-up? Can you name a Taiwanese startup that you would consider like a category creation example?
Category creation?
Like a there's no way that's going to work, and then oh my God, it actually worked, and and everyone was adequately compensated for the risk that they took, right? Like we're just completely out of like, oh, didn't realize you could build that and that would actually like stick.
Well, I mean, the easy example for me is Din Tai Fung.
Oh.
Right? Like, well, I mean, like a F&B.
Also, the single most competitive like food environment I've ever seen in my life.
How in the
anywhere.
world would that ever work? It would never work, and it would never be global. But F&B, so
I don't like Taiwan is playing at another level when it comes to food. So I don't know if that counts. Yeah.
I mean, there are other examples. Trend Micro is another good example in the security space. Obviously in the entire like supply chain from Foxconn to Wistron to Quanda to others, but
that's not really category creation, right? They're leveraging existing strengths and they're doing it smaller, cheaper, higher volume, more precise, right? Like.
Well, I think TSMC was a category creation, right? Like the
funding came out of E-Tree, right?
Yeah.
And also
that's my point.
And also Morris being ticked off that they weren't respecting him down in Texas. So, he had a grudge and he had capital. That's a great way to build a company.
I agree with that. So, I mean, yeah, I think if there were private capital that was started at TSMC in Taiwan, I think that would be a really good way for them to demonstrate to the ecosystem what that might have been like as a capital provider, and they would just continue to do that, which I think NDF has actually.
And look, I agree. I think there's like a huge amount of value there, but I find the capital to be very it's a little cautious. It's a little
very cautious.
Very. There's a lot of like, so how much money are you going to make next quarter, Dom? And I'm like, we're pre-revenue, so somewhere between 0 and infinity, like whatever answer gets you to write the check. So it doesn't. Yeah.
Well, just know if you ever 3x, they might want you to exit.
No, because I do remember like these 7 years, like a huge difference between, we took our Series A for YouTube from here in Silicon Valley, Series B here from Sequoia Capital, and like in the term sheet up there's a clause that says you can't even talk to somebody if their acquisition offer is less than 100 million. And now I'm sitting on a few boards of companies that have members that are both in Taiwanese companies that are trying to break into the US market, but they have board members that are both from Taiwan and from US, and that's always this discussion. And so I think what you were alluding to about kind of the maturity of the sort of the startup ecosystem there in Taiwan, it's still not at all at the same level. And you see it even in the board meetings where there's a contentious about it. The company's doing well, but it's one party's really just saying exit. The other one is forget about monetization. Let's just keep growing and let's see where this takes us.
I think the good thing is that hopefully we're starting to see good signs in the right direction, right? Where it used to be that some of our companies, they were looking at, we had a company that was looking at London, Australia, Tokyo in terms of stock exchanges to list on, and Singapore. And now there are companies in those countries that are looking at to list on Taiwan. So I think that's a positive, as it matures and as sophistication and learning is spread through the ecosystem, hopefully the Taiwan gets to capture more and more of that.
Yeah. Well, finally, I think we'll close a bit by just looking forward from the standpoint of Taiwan from 2026, right? AI has continued to reshape everything on both sides of the corridor, and I think the focus isn't so much where Taiwan is today in April 2026, but looking forward, how does that relationship evolve over the next 5 years? If that's even too long, but 5 years, 10 years out, AI is starting to automate a lot of the processes that has made Taiwan indispensable, from design, from testing, and even chip manufacturing and architecture. Maybe, Dom, this is a question for you. Is that a threat to the edge that Taiwan has had for the last few years? Or is this a new platform for Taiwan to be building on top of?
You think like the automation and stuff, is that gonna, I mean, if I were to like look at the most realistic threats to Taiwanese business and silicon in particular, the one I keep hearing about is basically being undercut on price in China, right? But I think there are certain unique things that Taiwan can do, being more sort of Western aligned, that China's always going to struggle to compete with, right? Like security and trust and transparency. But convincing folks in Taiwan that these are like actual product features that you can charge money for is not easy, right? Because it's not a tangible thing. So it kind of, the value is hard to see, right? So I think Taiwan's going to continue to have a lot of structural advantages going into the future.
Yeah.
But I think that there does need to be some realizing the value of ecosystems that are not based around just physical goods. And that's a hard thing until there's a runaway success where everyone's like, oh wait, let's, be the X of Y. That's going to be really hard to get people to see the value of, I think.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, for Jonathan, Tony too, I mean, I think it's, if you'd say like, maybe if you could make one concrete change that you'd make tomorrow to strengthen Taiwan's position today, like, what would that be? And maybe be honest about, why hasn't it happened already?
I would probably just airdrop a Taiwan stablecoin to everybody in the world. I mean, there are sort of these synthetic devices that can, like Balaji Srinivasan talks about the sort of the digital country, like the network state. There are ways I think Taiwan can really leverage itself on the financial side. Because we looked at a bunch of different sectors, and even though Taiwan is probably a top, 20, 25 GDP country, it's top 10 on financial services. So it punches way above its weight. So I think there are ways for it to extend its financial prowess beyond the borders of Taiwan. Unfortunately, as you were mentioning, is one of the most difficult things you can possibly do is to open a bank account in Taiwan. So if there is a parallel process or a parallel system that makes it super easy and gets people in other countries, not just the Lithuanias of the world, but in other countries to care about, and outside of the whole GPU infrastructure to care about Taiwan longevity, I think financial services are a really good place to start.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I hope Taiwan can be more daring, and a lot of the bank issues, financial controls and stuff has to do with its history and the currencies managed. It's not a easily tradable currency. And it does lead the banks to therefore be very risk adverse in how they assess clients. So wiring 5 NT is the same as 500 NT is, there's certain breakers, but I think the risk assessment is just so restrictive that it doesn't allow so much business to occur. And you see that across, I think, a lot of different industries, not just the financial industry in Taiwan, that the mindsets of, if people could be more daring like they are here, not to fear failure, but also not to fear the punishment, I guess, because they fail, which is a very Taiwanese thing to do. That it could open a lot of more things. So now that it's the 6th largest stock market, there's overnight millionaires, overnight billionaires now in Taiwan. So I'm hopeful that there will be a lot more investment and now that they have a bit more capital to play around with, maybe that they'd be more daring to try things that could, go into the different areas.
Yeah, and even from like a personal perspective, I think that I grew to appreciate Silicon Valley a lot more after I moved out and moved to Taiwan, and saw what I was missing in Taiwan when I tried to start a company there, right? And it's just, I think especially when that target audience is outside of Taiwan, so you're going after a global audience, and when it comes to just hiring, the cultures, especially more for the consumer product, it is a lot easier to do things in Silicon Valley. And it was almost every step along the way, from trying to find co-founders to try to find entrepreneurially minded co-founders, trying to find, again, like in the equivalent of a sandhill road, where just every stop you make is just another VC waiting to write a check. And I think the risk tolerance there, and then from a legal standpoint, there was just a lot from a banking standpoint, things can be done overnight, 2-3 days, and you can finish things. And so I think that it wasn't until I moved to, I thought that was the norm until I moved to Taiwan and started a company and realized it's much harder to do here than it is. It's not just, it doesn't come down just to the engineers or the ideas, but that entire ecosystem's there. Cool, well, thank you, Tony, thank you, Jonathan, thank you, Dom. I think it's important to have discussions like this, and I think it's important to be able to get it from multiple mindsets. And so I'm really just happy that you three were able to share the stage with me today to share your views. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Dave.
I was actually just stretching there, but I guess I'll come up with my buddy James Hong here, we were like talking about speculating. Do you guys have a perspective on what, this is a probably sensitive question, at some point in the future, Trump and Xi will both be dead. What's the Taiwan perspective in a world where both of those two polarizing figures are not around? Go for it.
Like, are they having a boxing match in May or something? Like, is it like at the same time, or do we is there an ordering to it? I don't know. Like, everyone will chill out a little bit, and maybe we can do a little bit more cross-strait trade without the threats. Would be nice. Well, who knows?
Well, I mean, Dave, to that point, I think there was this period where Taiwan really benefited from, being able to have graduates come over and return to Taiwan. That almost stopped entirely during China's rise, right? And so I think in the last few years, I think we've started to rethink whether that was a good thing, and hopefully we start seeing more of the return to sort of that pre-2005 era.
Yeah, it rarely works out well when people stop talking to each other. Long term.
Well, I mean, you saw, like even with the Mattis deal that just didn't, I thought that was going to go through. It didn't go through. But even last Friday, I was talking to the angel investor in Hong Kong, and we were celebrating that deal closed. So even from their perspective, they didn't know. I mean, I think that it's just interesting as I start thinking about doing more investments. You just have to be, even as an LP in some of these investments, if they have established entities inside even just Hong Kong, much less in mainland China. They're not. If you're a U.S. citizen, you just can't be on the cap table at all, right? And that's all changed in the last 18 months. So.
Well, and vice versa too, right? Like my cap table, we've been very clean on, because you can't do that. Like, it's just not. I don't know. I mean, it's not in that Mattis deal falling apart. It's not like that's great for China either, because that was a pretty big marker of credibility. And it's like these things can spiral down as just as easily as they can spiral up. Kind of thing. So
not sure what's happening.
This question.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Stanford for hosting this event. I just came back from Taiwan 2 days ago. Maybe we're on the same flight. Secondly, very insightful. The takeaway for me is human capital, ecosystem. 100% agree. Now, Tony, thank you for bringing up Boba and Din Tai Fung. The reason I say that is most people know about the 9 markets, right? But there's also some of the top cafes and bars in Taipei. And if you look at all the Instagram posters, a lot of influencers, right? There's new food, new restaurants, new eateries every day, every night. So what are your thoughts about food tech?
As an investment area, we don't really do that, particularly because the areas of consumer investment, or in Taiwan, I would probably put consumer pretty far down the list, just because I think in consumer, you can get the wrong signals very early, and it could lead you to believe you have product market fit in one geography, which you don't in another. And a good example, like Line is a great example. No one here uses Line, right? Line is popular in Taiwan, Japan, and Thailand, and it really hasn't crossed over. And you think, oh, well, that was a long time ago. But I'll give you another good example, is that no one here uses Threads, but it's really popular in Taiwan. Right? So if that was your growth distribution strategy, and I bring up these platforms because consumer tends to lean on these social platforms for distribution. And so if that's your strategy, you're really reaching a very, very limited population, and you may not ever reach the US. So that's partly why F&B as a category that sits under consumer is not something that we look at. Now, if you were talking about F&B in terms of on the agriculture side or on the farming side, we have looked at some of those. And particularly because I believe you get taxed in Taiwan if you're not making your land productive, or if you don't have a solar panel on top of it. So a lot of these, if you don't have some way of working the land. So a lot of the solar farms there have started planting things just to avoid that tax. So yeah, we've looked at some of those, but not F&B as a consumer category.
I want to bring another sort of industry here, the healthcare industry. I think in the last 2 years, there's been so much work in integrating healthcare data in Taiwan. So by the end of this year, all the electronic medical records in all the hospitals in Taiwan are going to be interoperable. That's 23 million people, and that's for medical data. This is not claims data. This is electronic medical records. And then, of course, the claims is already linked. There's 500,000 people with DNA sequenced in Taiwan already for precision medicine. So once all the data are linked, there is so ripe for discovery. In fact, I can't think of another country where there's 23 million people's data ready to be explored. And some of those, I look at some of the analyses last night. It's pretty incredible. Taiwanese people like to go to the doctors, right? So it's like 15 times a year, right? Okay, 15 times a year to the doctor's office. And not only that, they get labs. Now, I've never seen so much lab in my life, like on the same person. Like over a period of 1 year, how can this person be drawn so many labs? And so those are the data that is not available, in my opinion, anywhere else for medicine, for caring of the patient, right? And I think this area, if you plug in AI, is going to explode in the next few years. And that's to the credit of the government, actually. The government actually make it interoperable, created sandboxes for inquiry, for scientific discovery, and part of it also is to reduce healthcare cost so that you could do early detection, prevention, care management, and all that. So I think that's an area that up to this point has not been a breakthrough, but I think it's heading into a breakthrough at this point. So don't overlook that sector.
And that's why I mentioned healthcare in addition to cybersecurity. So you just jumped ahead to our next conversation. I would love to dig further into it. But just to elaborate on that, the reason why U.S. healthcare EMR is completely useless is that our electronic medical records is not meant for clinical diagnosis. We keep those records for one reason and one reason only. It's for billing. It's a billing system, and each has a CPT code or some sort of ICD-9 code, and that's so you could get paid, so clinicians could get paid, and that's a very important thing. But we confuse that for, oh, well, we can just go mine all that data. That data is really, and it will lead to actually bad outcomes. I think with Taiwan, probably the closest to that is there's 100,000 genomes in UK, but even then, that's a far distance. Like to be able to have longitudinal data that where you do have genomes, I think the only reason that becomes valuable is because of the large labs. And this is why we've been looking, because you can now have a customer that has the capital and also the capabilities of actually making that data useful. We don't have that capability in the US. Because even if that data were useful, and you talk to Epic and Cerner and all these providers, they'll, oh yeah, we have APIs. They make it parenthetically very difficult to access.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, great panel. You talked about some of the cultural strengths and differences of Taiwan and say compared to Silicon Valley. Now we know much of East Asia is hierarchical, much more hierarchical than compared to say the US. And I was wondering, and that includes Taiwan, how do you see the emphasis on hierarchy either changing or evolving or not important to boosting Taiwan's startup mentality and ecosystem?
I don't want to answer that. You can answer that.
One example that doesn't really answer the question, but I think kind of also provides a frame of reference is Taiwan's a very filial society where the hierarchy includes the parents and the family. There's many cases of startups founders where they're Taiwanese founders. They were invited to come to the U.S. for various reasons, and they had to ask their parents. And and then the parents are like, why would you do that? Why don't you work at TSMC? Why don't you why are you taking 6 months of your time to work on a startup in the U.S.? And that mentality, I think, is quite prevalent. But we are starting to see much of the younger generations start to look for different options. I think so. As Dom mentioned earlier, is if we can get more reference cases of these startups that that the younger generation can look up to as a model, I think we'll see much more of them being willing to step out of that comfort zone and challenge their parents, which I think is ultimately a good thing. But it does take a bit of options and for them to think about different ways of that.
So I'm probably the least qualified in the background to speak on this, except for one thing, which I'll kind of talk about. So I've seen like 3-ish things happen. One, I'll see people just leave. Very often, actually quite talented women. I have a lot of very close like expat friends, right? Because they're like, look, I wanted to do something different, and there was a big argument with my parents, and I'll see them when I see them. They're like, okay, rough. The other thing is folks will come and work for like a Western company, so we get a lot of that. And then the other thing is sometimes with customers or vendors, there's like the hierarchy that I know I'm supposed to talk to, but then there's all the other people's phone numbers I have who are sort of like, Dom, do it this way, right? And then like over time, you kind of like get a sense of who is like, I understand what the rules are, I know what the hierarchy is, but like maybe in a year, if I'm looking for something else, we can have a conversation, right? So you do see people who are kind of like wanting to try something different. I feel like honestly, a lot of it just comes down to the sort of means they have, right? Like, so there is some of that, but then there's some people who are like totally happy, like TSMC. I've got my scooter and my apartment in Chinchu, and I'm good to go, right? Yeah. But there's I do have a lot of these kind of conversations where people are like, oh, I want to try it like this way. I'm like, you're not going to tell me what to do, and I'm like, please, no, I don't have time for that. Like, I'm not going to do that. So,
well, I'll say the hierarchical nature is a limitation in the same way that very agreeable LLMs are not that useful, right? Like the reason in the startup context, you have this trifecta of product managers, designers, and developers is that they, if it's the first time you've experienced this, it's very abrasive. Like you're like, whoa, what the heck? But they're going at it because you're going to get a better result in the end. And they know they're all trying to accomplish the same thing, but each of them brings along something very, very valuable that needs to be represented for the end user. So you lose a lot of that when you have very agreeable developers or language models.
Hi, my name's Steven. I've worked in surgical robotics for quite a few years, and it's a very early stage startup. And then I think we've been able to work with some partners that will give us breaks at times to help us iterate. I'm curious what types of advantages Taiwan has in terms of things where partners will help you iterate or try new things. And then outside of that 5-mile block of high technology, I myself speak Taiwanese, and so I'm curious how doing things outside of that block is.
I think you kind of want to, is anyone in healthcare in Taiwan? Because those are the people you want to talk to that's on the sandbox side. Oh, yeah. Anybody on healthcare, robotics that you could talk to after? I could talk to you after.
I have the last question. Hey, guys. The question is, for those who are Stanford students who are like second and third generation, we've done a great job of branding and making Taiwanese American a thing. What are we doing to make it easier for them? Or maybe Steve, you can talk about how easy or difficult it was for you taking a kid who knows Silicon Valley, grew up here, and then plugged them into Taiwan. How easy and how ready is Taiwan for second and third generation to start going back as Taiwanese American becomes a thing?
I have a pitch. I think one of the most Taiwan has incredible soft power, as the Director Chris had mentioned, and one of the most successful programs I've ever seen is something pejoratively called Love Boat, but it was called the Study Abroad program. I'm so jealous I didn't have the privilege of going through that, but I think what it has shown is the power of being able to have that soft power over a long period of time. And I think there needs to be some professional program that sort of mimics Love Boat, but for early career, and I think that would have a lot of value. And maybe the Gold Card, which I was a beneficiary of, is sort of like the beginnings of that into an actual program where people can go and get immersion.
I think one of the interesting things about the Gold Card that happened was essentially it was a program for foreigners, people of different nationalities and foreign passports. What I think no one really realized, and what COVID brought out, was how many Taiwanese Americans were on the program. And I've been pitched this as well, people that want to join a second, Love Boat 2.0, or Kevin then pitched a tech boat idea. Which I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think Taiwan is quite ripe for this actually, especially because in the recent years, with Alex Climbing 101, so many food influencers, more movies now made. You have a panel from the director of Left-Handed Girl. It's much more welcoming for Taiwanese Americans now, much more than ever before. There is no official program, unfortunately, yet.
Can you turn the Gold Card program into something like that?
I wish I had time. If somebody wants to help, I think there's definitely a lot of, desire for it. Either even from age school students that want to go back from summer school to learn more Mandarin, to recent graduates that are now looking for different options. I think Taiwan's very receptive of it. That's for sure. Even government or private. But it's really, how do we create something? The interesting thing about Love Boat was that was never its intention. It was just a cultural immersion program that college graduates really got to connect with each other. I think that's the part that if we could create something for that, that would be really cool. But if there's any volunteers, come talk to me after the panel, I guess. Yeah.
The Taiwan government shut that down because kids were having too much fun. I would argue that's exactly why it worked.
That's exactly why.
That is exactly why we're.
Yeah, and that we need because the generation is aging out. We're too old so we need to be able to revive that for sort of college, post-college.
Actually, there is someone that's trying to revive the love boat with, reunions and working with the Taiwanese government, Christine Xu. So would love to chat with you more on that.
Thank you.
Since we are talking about the soft power, so we are today this is our signature events during the conference. As many of you know, Boba tea, 珍珠奶茶, is one of Taiwan's most iconic cultural products that in the world. And since emerging in Taichung in the 1980s, Boba has traveled far beyond Taiwan, from Taiwan to the Bay Area and to everywhere in the United States. So for this signature event, we really spent a lot of time trying to persuade a lot of Boba Chen in the Bay Area to come and to make a presentation, to share their experiences about marketizing Taiwan's Boba tea. But even with Stanford title and name card, they all decline us because they said Boba is a secret. It's their marketized secret, so they cannot share. However, today we are finally persuade one Boba Chen called Boba Bliss, a family-owned business founded by two sisters with a lifelong passion for boba tea. And I'm going to open the floor to the Boba Bliss team, and they are bringing their chef and their staff here to share how they cultivate the boba value, how they decide the flavor, how they transport Taiwan's boba tea into the Bay Area audiences. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. First of all, thanks for having us here. The whole team here are from Boba Bliss, and we are honored and humbled to be here at Stanford University. Earlier was just mentioned very quickly in traditions. It's all completely founded and branded by our siblings, me, my sister, my brother. They husband and wife, and that's how they started everything. And then they was like the creation of everything, of the drink that you'll be drinking in a few minutes. And then John here will help us with all of our locations. Very important person of our company. I get to do the fun part of the job where speaking to people, seeing people, but they probably do the hardest job of the whole thing. So thank you for having us, and we're super humbled to be here today. Should I just start up with telling about Boba Bliss? Can I stand while I talk? Yes, I can move around. So first of all, if any of you here have heard of it or may have not, we first founded in East Bay, Pleasanton, Dublin location. Honestly, we took the risk because it's been 6.5 years old now for our brand, and we have 5 locations. Little that we know, we honestly, 3 of us siblings just sit down and saying that, hey, let's open something that we really love. We love to drink boba, we enjoy boba, and every time we gathering for dinner, for talking, family talk, we bring boba. We thought that why don't we come out with something that Asians so proud of? And then we evolve with the culture over here of the Western culture to make it good drinks, good boba, health conscious, very high quality ingredients. So everything you're gonna enjoy later, I hope you like it. And everything we make is really good because we put in a lot of love. So that's a natural ingredients. We put a lot of passion in there. All the milk, everything we use, there is no powder, no fructose thing that you will be drinking in a little bit. And everything we make in-house. I can share a little bit of the menu today. We bringing with you, we love the Camellia Oolong tea. That's my favorite right now because it's just very elegant, nice tea. No dairy option. So anyone cannot do dairy, that's your option. Then we have the brown sugar pearl fresh milk. That is something we combine of the traditional Taiwanese, Chinese, Asian drink and organic milk over here. And we make it 100% in-house. So that one has dairy, but that one have no caffeine. So no caffeine, that's your option. The next one is the newest one that we are very proud. Usually I like to go around, I go travel, I enjoy. So just a quick trip to Italy and I saw a lot of pistachio. So I'm like, why can't we mix something from Italy with Asian culture, with boba tea? So Tony here, he's the chef. He create every drink that you try at Boba Bliss. So he really came out with the pistachio cream. Everything made in-house from fresh pistachio, combined with jasmine milk tea. So that's the menu. I just give you a quick rundown of the menu today. Please enjoy, and we just make it fresh just 20 minutes ago to make sure ice not melted for you guys. Any quick question pop up from you guys here? I just don't want to keep talking. But the also reason we want to be here because we felt like Stanford is very special to all of us. Every year, I feel like we come here at least 5 or 7 events for catering and many events we catering at Stanford Hospital and Stanford Pharmacy Department. And then a lot of time we do fundraising and catering for different departments of Stanford University. So we really, we just want to be here. We want to thank you for the opportunities and we just want to show face. Yeah. Yep. I think that's what I have, but I am welcome for any questions that you guys have for us.
I'm curious, like, since you are bringing your chef here, like, what's your favorite menu that is not popular in the Bay Area so that you have to take it out?
Oh, really? Something not popular?
Yeah. Like, what's your favorite flavor that actually not that popular, so you can kind of have to take it out, but you really want to bring it back?
That's a great question. Because usually we're going to go from what most popular. So let me think, what's not popular?
Or what's the most popular one?
We brought you guys the most popular one today. The brown sugar pearl fresh milk pistachio that we proudly created, one of the very first shop, I believe so, and Camellia Oolong tea. Something not popular. I've been convincing him to make durian, but but he refused because he don't think it's gonna sell. So yeah, that's something potentially not popular for us, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so the second question though, since you are running a family-owned trend, a family-owned brand, which is very different from a large brand, and what does that, how does running a family-owned shop shape your brand in the ways that distinguish the brand itself from the larger brand actually get transmitted from Taiwan to the Bay Area?
Yeah, I believe it's a big difference, right? Huge challenge at the beginning, I would say, because think about when we opened, we just know all the big boba brands, and we got intimidated. So don't get me wrong, we were very scared. So before we took the very first location, so I came back to that and said, "Oh, guy, the boba guy's a few minutes away. The teaspoon down there. Oh my God, I don't know. We should open, right?" So that was the first thing we thought of. Like people know of the brand and people know of the name. When you already come in with your brand, the line's gonna be out of the door. So for us, the biggest challenge was to prove it, to prove that we're here to stay. We're here to to be proud of the product and the drink that we make for our customer. And more than that, I think I always think of to myself, and I share with my sibling and John. I say, you know what? Something I want to improve in our Asian food culture here is customer service. So anytime people walk in Bliss, if you order a wrong drink, no question asked, they change it. You don't take right, they change it. We want to get to the level where people think boba tea is fun, pleasant, enjoyable, and that was something harder for us at the beginning. It's a smaller family-owned brand. It took a long way to come along, but now we're very happy, right, where we stay now, because proven 5 years later, we just got the biggest news was we got our main door location into one of the biggest tech company where they reached out to us, and we got invited in, and now we just opened inside Meta at the headquarters. Yeah. So we was compete against So we were going in, compete 5 other bigger brands. So me and John go home, I say, I'm gonna delete all email, John. I'm not gonna look. I don't think we're gonna make it, because the name was much smaller than all.
Know which brands you are competing with? Is that a
Don't know if I can share, but yeah. I'm just thinking, oh my God, they have hundreds of stores. They cross nation, they all over the state. Who we are, right? Just 4 of us. So, but then we got a call after, and we got in. Yeah.
Okay, I think people are so eager to get boba tea. I can see from your faces. Yeah. So maybe just share one final memorable stories that all of you really want to tell us, and then we can line up for boba tea after.
Do you guys have stories? I have, but I want you guys to say. Okay, so quick. So the very, very first, the reason we do catering today that you guys see exactly today was our very first boba catering event when we just opened the store, just 3 of us. John was young, so just 3 of us opened first. Running back and forth the kitchen, the line was so crazy. All of a sudden, everyone come in. But then one of the couple, they about in their 60s, and they always get in line to get boba. He always get in line to get boba for his wife. And then on weekend, he's like, can I do catering? So at first we're thinking catering. We're so small, we just open. We don't have any logistic. All we know is cook boba, cook tea, and every boba and tea we have is fresh. We don't keep it over a couple hours, and everything at the end of the night we never reuse. So everything really fresh. So the story was, he said, can I do catering wedding for my daughter wedding? So I said yes, because he was so sincere and he very sweet, and husband and wife always come. So imagine the store only 3 of us, and I took to go to catering. So I just called somebody else, help Gigi back there at the store. So the wedding went on, very successful. The drive that we drove for wedding was Napa. We do special drink that they request and everything we did, and we didn't even know what to charge at the time, like travel costs, labor, none of that. We don't know. We just want that special for them. And I think it's about 3 months after the wedding. So the wife reached out back to me saying that my husband passed away, because he was the one order and wanted that. So I say, really, what happened was significant. He said because he had cancer, and he wanted to have us a part of the family event. But he didn't share with me at all about cancer or whatsoever. So I think that story stayed with me long time. His wife, his daughter, now his grandchildren too text me to today. They still go to Bliss. And from that one event on, and that customer is give me a very special memory and story to tell now. It wasn't just a $6 drink that person drink. It's something that they walk out the door, what we make them feel, right? Because we don't ever say we have the best boba drink, no. So don't think like that when you drink later. we never say that, yeah. But we know what we have is we do the best we can for the customer, and we not feel bad that the ingredients that you guys take in. So everything we use are natural and no powder. And that's what the story stay with us, where we know that it's something linked to the family, to the story they talk at the table. And at the end of the day, that make us so happy. Even though we so tired, we run around all day, we drive for the catering. But now I look back, if I didn't do the catering, I think the story would be different, and we would never be part of their special wedding picture. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for Nikki and their team. So please hold 1 minute, and they are going to get their boba ready.
While we're here, can I tell you about the menu real quick? Because, yeah, the middle one is Camilla Oolong Tea, no dairy. And then on the left is the pistachio jasmine, and then the brown sugar is toward the very end. So there's a name tag and the sign on the menu too. So yeah, please give it a try, and thank you so much again for having all of us here.
Yeah.